What is up, everybody? I'm No Lux Given here with your afternoon snap, and today we are going to take a look at the games that got me to Infinite this season, kicking things off with one of my favorite games, and that's partially because Central Park is one of these locations, which is really not a great location for Galactus, but we are going to be able to salvage this one thanks to Death's Domain and some other tricky things that we have going on. This is one of my favorite games. We're going to take a look at the 13 games that I played from rank 98 to Infinite rank at the very end of this season. Well, not quite the end of the season. I played these games a while ago. I basically hit Infinite right after Iron Lad came out. You might be able to tell Death currently costs 9 and then just went down to 8 from Electro and then 7 here from Ironheart being destroyed. But these games are a little bit old. Some of the cards have changed. I haven't really changed the deck list around at all though. Haven't really been playing this deck too much since hitting Infinite, but at the end of this video I will talk about where I might go with Galactus in future seasons, as well as some other things to think about with this deck currently. But this game, I'll let you in now on the plan for it. We are playing Dr. Octopus plus Absorbing Man because Death's Domain is kind of locked out, at least for us. So if we can use Dr. Octopus to lock my opponent out of the other two locations, then we might be able to win, especially because Magic now gives us Limbo, which gives us an additional turn to potentially add some power to the board this game. We might actually have a shot. My opponent doesn't play anything on turn 5 because they want to play their best flipped cards there for Mr. Negative, so they're going to hold off on that decision, but they still get to cheat in some pretty big cards here off my Dr. Octopus. So now they've got a 22 power lead in Central Park. That's going to be tough to beat. I can easily beat my opponent in Limbo, but I also cannot beat my opponent in Death's Domain. They snap on turn 6, and I'm gonna Kang this turn just to see what's up. I'm not exactly sure what my opponent is thinking about with that snap, but I do think that we might actually have a way to win this game still. It's gonna be close, and I don't know if my opponent has any other funky tricks up their sleeve, but I think we might be able to do it. And it looks like no funky tricks. They're just playing a Mystique this turn, which doesn't actually do anything. It's actually not even a good card to play. I mean, they don't know that, but I've got Death and Null. So it's just kind of making Death cheaper and making Null bigger, so they probably don't want to play Mystique here at all. But now I'll let you in on the other trick that we're going to do this game, because we have 8 energy on the final turn of the game, thanks to that Electro and it being a 7-turn game. So if we wave, we'll be able to play 2 huge cards. And then from there, we can also just Iron Lad and throw that into Death's Domain. And because this is from a little bit ago, like I said, this is some old footage, Wave will actually discount Death as well. So we'll be able to play a free Death on the final turn, plus a big Null and a cheap America Chavez. 3 cards on the final turn. It's going to allow me to add a bunch of power. Mystique will also make Death cheaper, and I didn't even need to destroy as many cards here as I did. We can see Death is already free with a few cards destroyed prior to this in this game, but Iron Lad here is really big. That grabs me Spider-Man, which locks my opponent out of Death's Domain for the final turn, unless they've got like Jeff the Baby Landshark, but I don't really care about that card either. That's just more power for Null, and we will get to drop a ton of power on the final turn. That's enough to easily swing Limbo, and 26 power will also allow me to grab a win in Central Park. So from here, a little bit cheeky, I figured if I snap, maybe my opponent might think I'm bluffing and be more likely to stay in it, or just maybe they wanted to give me some cubes. I'm not sure. You never know exactly what your opponent's thinking, but I decided to snap and see if we can take 8 cubes from my opponent here, and we are going to be able to do so. They're going to stay in it, not being able to play anything on the final turn, just kind of hoping we're bluffing at that point. I think they do think about it for a while, but ultimately they do decide to give us the cubes there, and we get to surprise them with 30 power in Central Park, 20 power in Limbo, and 8 cubes on our way to Infinite. And that brought me up to exactly rank 98. And by the way, we still had to get 10 cubes per rank at this point in the season. This second game is super spicy. We've got Miniaturized Lab as location number 1. Location number 2 is Mirror Dimension, and our third location is Rickety Bridge. My opponent snaps upon seeing this, but Rickety Bridge is one of the best locations for this deck because it's really good with Galactus, it's really good with Dr. Octopus, and allows you to like kill Electro if you want to, so I'm excited to see what we can do with this deck, but we don't actually have any plays before the 4th turn of the game. Kind of awkward. We didn't draw any ramp. If we did, I think we easily could have won this game, but without that, it might be a little bit trickier. We do get to play Electro this turn into Rickety Bridge, blowing that up, and my opponent's Deathlock, since nobody can play in the mini lab before the final turn of the game. On turn 5, I'm going to snap as I drop a Kang, see what my opponent's got going on, maybe try to pressure them a little bit with this Kang play. Just, you know, you get a free snap. So we'll see what my opponent has going on with this. And they're going to play cards to both bridge locations, a wave, remember this is pre-nerf wave, and a Squirrel Girl. So if my opponent makes that exact same play again, I think we're in a pretty good spot because we can just Spider-Man on the 5th turn of the game. Regardless of where that Spider-Man goes, we're going to blow up the bridge, and then we'll be able to drop Galactus into a webbed location. So I'm going to drop Spider-Man here and hope that that's enough to get us the win, but it seems like it might be able to. So that's looking good. We'll see what my opponent has here. A few different potential options, though, as they have a bunch of cards in hand, and they are actually going to pivot from that. It's tricky when you Kang and then you snap again after the Kang. Kind of lets your opponent know, maybe don't make that play. So my opponent is going to mix it up here a little bit and instead drop an arrow. So this isn't the worst thing in the world for us. It still means that we get to Spider-Man into Bridge and then have a clear location that we are able to Galactus into against a web. So I'm feeling pretty good about this. We just dropped Galactus and we should be able to beat my opponent in the Rickety Bridge. Again, Jeff, the baby land shark notwithstanding, but Dr. Doom is also a pretty good card for my opponent, and Galactus is one of the few cards that gets us out of this situation. We'll be able to blow up the other 2 locations where my opponent is winning. Then, of course, in this other location where my opponent is also winning, we're just going to blow up everything in there too because of the Rickety Bridge. So 8 cubes, we wind up grabbing a tie, and that will keep us at 98.0. This game, I do think, is probably against a bot here, but I do want to showcase all 13 of these games on my climb up to Infinite. Plunder Castle is location number 2 after we see a Sanctum Sanctorum. Plunder Castle recently removed for there just being too many locked down locations in the game. And then our third location, kind of a lockdown location as well, Collapsed Mine. At the very least, we'll all need to skip turn 3, so that way we can play the rest of the game. But I'm gonna snap because we actually have a pretty good hand to take advantage of this. One of the interesting things about Galactus is you don't really want locked down locations. You want as many lanes as possible to set up your ramp and then your Doc Ock and then your Galactus ultimately to win the game. But when you do have a bunch of lockdown locations, it makes it just easier to win with cards like Spider-Man and Dr. Octopus and previously Professor X I also played in this deck. And in this game I saw a pretty clear line. We could Spider-Man plus Absorbing Man into the only non-locked down location, and then we just have to beat my opponent in Plunder Castle on the final turn of the game after we Spider-Man plus Absorbing Man them here. Now, there is one other option. We could wave this turn. That was initially going to be my plan when I snapped, because we could wave and that would keep my opponent out of Plunder Castle on the final turn of the game as well, because you can only play 6 cost cards into Plunder Castle. Now that my opponent has cheated that Tiger into the location, it is going to make me kind of deviate from that plan just a little bit. I'm now going to Absorbing Man in the Collapsed Mine again, let my opponent potentially play into the Plunder Castle on the final turn of the game, and now we just maybe have to beat them on differential or something, whereas otherwise maybe we could have tried to win with like Shang-Chi or something. But we do have Kang to at least see what's coming up from my opponent's side of the board. So I'm going to drop Kang on the final turn of the game, and my opponent doesn't play anything. And this is why I think it's probably a bot. My opponent's currently up by 7, down by 4, so they're winning by 3, and that causes them to stay in it here, even though they don't have a play to Plunder Castle for the final turn of the game. So assuming they still don't have a play to Plunder Castle, America is able to grab 8 cubes. So that'll put me up to 98.8, and we're getting pretty close to infinite. We've still got a few games to go, though this one is pretty straightforward. I see Rickety Bridge, I've got Electro and Dr. Octopus, and I draw Galactus as well. So this game is just really well set up for me. And then I draw Spider-Man. I decide on turn 2, though, that I'm gonna snap, and that's when my opponent decides to retreat, and we wind up 1 cube closer in our climb. But we're gonna give that cube right back as I make a small mistake-ish in this game. Not really a mistake, it just doesn't wind up working out for me and causes me to lose this one. My opponent leads off with Korg plus Zabu into the kiln, and then location number 3 is going to be Lemuria. So I'm still just going to drop Electro this turn. The important thing is it'll give us 6 energy on turn 5, so we can play Galactus ahead of schedule. Doesn't really matter that we don't get to play anything noteworthy this turn. I'm just going to drop a rock into kiln. That'll make death a little bit cheaper, maybe that will be relevant. And my opponent flips over a Darkhawk plus a Rock Slide to give us a few more rocks. I don't mind that they have a big Darkhawk here because we just get to destroy that, and that'll mean we've got an even bigger null. On turn 5, we've got 2 options for where to drop Galactus. We can play it into Lemuria, which keeps Rock Slide alive, and then my opponent definitely has priority going into the final turn, or I can just drop it into Necrotia. We're still not adding any power there, so it's a 50-50 whether we give my opponent priority if they don't play anything there, but they do play something there. They play Polaris, which moves over that rock that I shouldn't have played, and now we don't get to activate Galactus, and we have to retreat. This game isn't super great for me. Turn 2, our location is the Peak, which isn't that great with my current hand. It actually is just kind of terrible with Iron Lad and doesn't really improve Absorbing Man or Spider-Man and doesn't change Wave at all. So kind of an awkward game, but I think that this one really showcases the power of Kang. We've got Shadowland as location number 3. I'm gonna wave on turn 3. We can wave and then Absorbing Man, which potentially gives us more draws to hit Galactus, and then we could Iron Lad on turn 5 because we'll Absorbing Man the wave. So a lot of potential options still in this one, but on turn 4, I draw Kang, and I can play it because I waved, so I'm just gonna Kang and I'm gonna snap, and that's enough to kind of bully my opponent here a little bit, apply some added pressure, and make them think twice about staying in it. So my opponent winds up retreating, and I just grab a free cube. That'll put me up to 98.9. Almost at rank 99 now. We're up against the same opponent here, actually. They're going to lead off with Bishop, and I'm going to lead off with an Electro into the Quantum Tunnel. We'll see what that gives me. I already have all of the big and important stuff in my hand, but it's nice to get Electro out of there. And then I draw Electro again. I'm not going to play Electro, though, this turn. I'm just going to drop Dr. Octopus into Hala. That gives me a lot of options. Turn 4 Doc Ock onto Hala is really fun. We either blow up a bunch of their cards, or we blow up Dr. Octopus, and then we've got a space to drop my Galactus, where I could potentially Shang-Chi for the final turn of the game. So we'll see what Dr. Octopus brings us: an Enchantress, a Killmonger, and then the 2 cards that my opponent played here, the first of which is Scarlet Witch. So that's going to turn off Hala and give us the Kiln, which means that now we have just lost that location. So we're not going to be able to play there, and actually, come to think of it, we won't be able to play Galactus there regardless because Avengers Compound is that center location. So we'll be dropping Galactus there regardless and just setting up for a huge null. I don't play any, or I don't snap this turn because I guess I wasn't sure of what my opponent could exactly do. And to be honest, I kind of just got into the habit of snapping during the Galactus animation, or after Galactus had completely 100% destroyed the other 2 locations just to play it safe, trying to only snap in games where I either knew I was going to win or the locations and early game draws made it look like it was very favorable for me. But a lot of people do play random tech for Galactus, could have dropped a Cosmo or something this turn, so I'm just going to play it safe, and that allows me to grind up my way 1 cube at a time here up to rank 99. So now we are at rank 99, and I just have to figure out where to drop this Electro. And it looks like my opponent is probably on some type of Nebula lockout deck. That kind of makes me want to Galactus into the raft. I think they're going to battle for the raft here. Looks like they definitely will be doing so, trying to fill the raft. And now I really want to play Galactus into that location after it's already full. That way I don't have to worry about the free 6-cost card that they get and could potentially win the game with. I'm going to drop Kang on turn 4 because I drew it off the top of my deck. I'm going to snap on the Kang turn, again, just for the little bit of free pressure and free percentage points that provides. But my opponent is going to stay in it here. We will get to see what they are planning on turn 4. And it's a pretty good read from them, actually, here. Spider-Man on turn 4 stops my Galactus on turn 5 into the raft. Now, they might have just been playing this because it was their play. It was the only thing that they could have done to try to win that location. But it winds up just being very, very awkward against me here. There's not really too much. I mean, it just means that now I'm going to have to Galactus into Jotunheim, which is still fine. But it means that they're still going to grab, and yeah, we might as well just Absorbing Man into Necrotia still. If we Absorbing Man into the raft, then we get a little bit more power on Null, but this at least holds them into making that same play, because they might deviate seeing my Kang, but they make the same play. Like I said, it's probably the only play that they had here, but it's a very, very good one for me, and you'll see precisely why in just a moment, because now we have to Galactus into Jotunheim, and they can beat us here with Professor X, which is a very common line. It was very popular as Nebula was the season pass card for the season, so a lot of this, and is part of the reason that I wasn't snapping until I knew Galactus had won me the game. My opponent plays a free leader plus a professor to get me here in Jotunheim, and it's actually kind of close because Jotunheim removes more power each turn if you have more cards there, but there won't quite be enough turns in the game for us to take the win, so we will lose a cube. Jotunheim might be a little bit more relevant this game though, as that's our first location on the very next game. Our second location though is Savage Land, which is a really terrible location for Galactus. It can sometimes work with lane lockdown because it just gives your opponent less spaces to play, and then with Spider-Man, Professor, and Doc Ock contributing to that, sometimes your opponent just doesn't have any spaces available. But then Sinister London shows up as location number 3, and that's just a total game changer. Typically when I see Sinister London, I just totally disregard Galactus because there's other sweet stuff that you can do. And on turn 3, my opponent winds up playing Polaris to move my Raptor into Jotunheim, so definitely can't Galactus there. I'm just going to drop Iron Lad into Sinister London and see what happens. Now, there's a chance I actually should have just played Iron Lad into Savage Land here. That would have kept Sinister London open in case I hit one of those ramp cards, Wave or Electro, but I don't, so I'm glad I didn't. I hit Dr. Octopus, which is going to make this turn super crazy. We're going to fill my opponent's Sinister London up with Juggernaut, which moves Iron Lad Dr. Octopus out of there, and then Killmonger, which blows up all the Raptors and my opponent's pair of Nova, giving all of their cards +2 power, and giving them some space again in Sinister London. But I'm not done with my turn. We did play Iron Lad in Sinister London, so I get to do it again. And I get to Doc Ock my opponent yet again, this time hitting a Serra and a Brood, my opponent's last 2 cards in their hand, so now they've got nothing in their hand, and they're also full in Jotunheim. We're currently tied in Jotunheim, but they're going to lose 4 power there each turn. We're only going to lose 2. Plus, I could play another card to Jotunheim if I really needed to. So, we've won that location. We just have to win one of the other 2 locations, and there's a few options for how to play it this turn, but ultimately, I think that if we drop Spider-Man, we should be in a good enough spot. And then on the final turn of the game, we can drop Shang-Chi into Sinister London, destroying my opponent's Maximus, or we could just drop Death, but that won't actually be exactly enough to grab the win, but maybe we can figure out something else to do on top of that. Ultimately, though, I think that this is probably good enough, so I'm going to snap here on the 5th turn as I drop this Spider-Man, and that is going to cause my opponent to retreat. And that will bring me back up to rank 99. This game's pretty straightforward. We've got Shadowland, the big house, and then our 3rd location is going to be the raft. So on turn 3, I'm just gonna drop Wave into the big house. We can't Galactus there anyways, and playing Absorbing Man in the deck allows you to play Wave, and if you don't hit Galactus, you can use Absorbing Man to Wave again, and then if you still don't hit Galactus, you can Iron Lad and potentially find it. But we do wind up hitting Galactus on turn 4, which is great, and the reason that I went for it here is because now I've got the ideal curve of Wave into Galactus into Spider-Man. And my opponent might wind up just filling up the raft this turn anyways to grab their free 6-cost card, but we kind of have them either way. Damned if they do, damned if they don't. And on turn 4, they are going to wind up filling up the raft. As we will see, they drop a Sarah. So they've got a free 6-cost card, but now they've got nowhere to play it. And from here, we basically just win the game. America Chavez is enough to flip the game over in our favor, and even Death will be enough to flip the game in our favor. I say even Death because we've already drawn it, but of course we're always going to draw America as well. I actually think this might have been a little bit of a mistake here to play Iron Lad, because then it lets them know we are definitely going to win. However, Iron Lad hits Kang. So now it kind of could potentially bluff my opponent into thinking that I don't have the win. So I'm just not going to play anything here into the raft on this final turn of the game. Maybe it would have been better to play like Electro or something that seems like very unassuming, but either way, my opponent is going to wind up retreating on this final turn, so it didn't really matter. But 2 more cubes, that's going to put me up to 99.2. So I'm very, very close now to hitting infinite, but that doesn't mean that I can't make some mistakes along the way. And just looking at this now, this might even be more embarrassing. This might have been a game up against a bot that dropped Invisible Woman into Murder World, but I'm gonna play Wave into Murder World here. Generally, I like waving or playing Electro into Murder World to just give me more options to potentially drop Galactus down the line, and then Absorbing Man, Iron Lad, we still have that same curve in case we don't draw Galactus, and I want to go for it here because we already have the Spider-Man as well, so we do have the potential to get that really, really insane curve. I'm not going to play Iron Lad this turn, though. I'm just going to Absorbing Man to Wave again, so that way we can just maximize our potential chances of drawing Galactus. I do think about playing Iron Lad. We could go Iron Lad into Cloning Vats next turn, play Iron Lad elsewhere, but ultimately I decided to play Absorbing Man, which is a pretty big mistake. They changed Absorbing Man maybe a little bit ago with a little parentheses there, if it's in play. Wave is no longer in play, so I don't get to copy it, which means I don't have cheaper cards this turn, and I actually can't play Galactus if I draw it. Now, I still don't draw it, so it's not the worst thing in the world. We could still hit it here off of the Iron Lad and potentially make some magic happen. My opponent is going to play yet another Lady Sif, setting up for a big Hela, and Iron Lad is going to hit Death. So no Galactus for me in this one. Kind of, I made some mistakes, but also Galactus was on the bottom of my deck, so it really didn't matter anyways. My opponent's gonna snap. I'm gonna drop Kang just to be kind of cheeky, see what they have, see what we got going on here. They just have Hellcow on the final turn, but I still really don't have any way to beat that, which is embarrassing. So yeah, nothing I can do, just gotta retreat and lose a cube. Back down to 99.1, but still very, very close to hitting infinite. This game, Sokovia is going to hit my Iron Lad and my opponent's Hellcow, another little discard deck for us here. And Camp Lehigh gives us Rogue, not going to be a super useful card. I'm basically just looking for Wave or Electro off of Camp Lehigh, but I do still draw Electro for my turn 3 draw. So everything is working out a-okay here, and I'm just going to Electro into Sokovia. I feel like with a kind of discard, potentially MODOK deck, you just want to avoid the Invisible Woman location and just play your cards elsewhere. My opponent is going to Rhino the Cloning Vats, so we won't have to worry about that. They grabbed a Rhino off Camp Lehigh and used that to turn off Cloning Vats, and then they snapped. We don't have a great play on turn 4. We're just going to be using Absorbing Man on Electro to grab a little bit more ramp post Galactus. And my opponent is going to play a turn 4 Jubilee, which hits their Hela and reanimates their Hell Cow, discarding Magneto and Odin. Yeah, really interesting play. They made use of the Sokovia discard with their Hela, but now they've got some other cards discarded, but they don't have a Hela at this point. And they also don't have a Magneto, but they also don't have any ramp. So we're just going to play Galactus here on turn 5, blowing up everything in Sokovia and Camp Lehigh. That'll put 20 power into Null, which I think will set me up well enough to win this game. So that's what I'm going to go for. My opponent actually doesn't play anything on turn 5, which then kind of complicates things because I've got a 20 power Null. There's another card that adds 20 power to the game if you skipped your 5th turn. My opponent could have Infinite, and they could just drop an Infinite here into the Ruin. So instead of playing out my big Null, I'm going to go for slightly less power and drop Death plus Shang-Chi. And they did have the Infinite. They instead opted to go Lady Sif plus Death, but we can go Death plus Shang-Chi, destroying their Death and grabbing 8 cubes. So now I am at 99.9. I only need one more cube and I will be infinite. So let's hop right into another one and see if we can get it done. See if we can get it done with Iron Lad here, specifically with my G-Lad deck. And I don't really remember what this is. Let me take a look at my notes here. Okay. This could be a fun one. Let me jump ahead just a little bit to see what we've got. We've got Kiln, which I've said is not really a great Galactus location, though could be a fun location with some lockdown. And we do have Dr. Octopus. We also have Mirror Dimension, which is how this video started. I think was Mirror Dimension was our second game, right? Yeah, Mirror Dimension was our second game. That first one was not a Mirror Dimension, but we're gonna throw we're gonna throw Electro into the Kiln rather, and then we're gonna see something else from my opponent here, but this sets us up well for Dr. Octopus and could potentially be pretty fun for us. They have a Nakia, and then we've got double Kiln. So both of those Kilns are going to be locked down after this turn, which gives some additional fun incentive here for us to just Dr. Ock into the Vibranium Mines. I have to feel like, yeah, that's what I gotta go for here. It means that I'm gonna be losing both of the Kilns, but they probably can't win both of them in a turn. They're gonna win that center Kiln with a Jubilee. What's that gonna give them? Magic. Okay, so that opens up one of the Kilns. We turn off Vibranium Mines by filling that location up for them. Kiln is a tie, and then we could even still potentially drop Galactus this game. My opponent wins in the Kiln now with that Iron Heart. So with Iron Man here in the mines, this is going to be close. White Tiger, okay. Well, they've definitely won the Kiln, but they've actually grabbed a loss in Vibranium Mines. So 2 different ways to win this game. I can either just win in Limbo, or I can Galactus and blow up the other 2 locations and then win in Limbo. But with Spider-Man on turn 5, I feel like that could be a good potential way to grab the Limbo win. My opponent snaps. What do we go for? I think we probably just Spider-Man, and then we're going to draw America next turn. So we could Iron Lad. We could also just Iron Lad right now, and that could find us either Absorbing Man into Dr. Ock or Galactus, both of which are reasonable lines. My opponent plays a Devil Dinosaur. Not going to be Shang-Chi-able as they don't have anything else in their hand, or don't have enough other stuff in their hand. We do actually hit the Shang-Chi. So this is a little bit awkward, but now I can Spider-Man on this turn, and that will keep them from making a final play. And then next turn, I'll actually draw that Shang-Chi again. So we'll be able to do that. Okay, that's a really good play now. So now either they play something this turn or they don't play anything, at which point we get to Shang-Chi, their devil dinosaur, on the final turn of the game. What's interesting is this is kind of telegraphed. The Iron Lad told my opponent we were about to draw Shang-Chi, so they will probably just retreat. Maybe they'll stay in it because Iron Lad confused them. Yeah, they thought we already played Shang-Chi, or maybe they were a bot, who knows. Either way, we grab the win, a very, very close one. And that is going to put me to infinite for the season with Iron Lad Galactus, without really making great use of either Iron Lad or Galactus on that final game, but still made great use of the whole deck. So that will get me to rank 100, and now I'll be able to claim that golden cassette card back. That is almost going to be it for me. I'm also going to talk about the deck a little bit. So I'm going to transition slides here, and we'll just talk for a second about the future of Galactus. So here's the deck in all of its glory, and honestly, I'm not sure that I would really want to change anything in the deck. However, there are two things that are ways that the deck could be updated. So the first is Crystal. And I haven't played too much Crystal in Galactus, but the theory is basically just that you Crystal, if you can increase your odds to draw Galactus, and you increase your opponent's chances to draw like random cards, then it doesn't really matter because Galactus is just more powerful than all of those random cards. So I could see a Crystal build of the deck working in the future. If you play Crystal, does that mean that you'll also want to play Psylocke, so that way you can go turn 2 Psylocke, turn 3 Crystal, and still have the opportunity to set up like a turn 4 Electro or Wave into a turn 5 Galactus? Possibly. I don't really know what I'd want to cut from the deck, unless you're going to try to cut like Spider-Man Doc Ock and make the deck really consistent in terms of playing Galactus, but not really consistent in terms of winning with Galactus. I will say that I don't think that you want to cut either Null, America, or especially Death right now. And that is because Spider-Ham is going to get added to Marvel Snap, and you just want other expensive cards in your hand to potentially take the fall for Galactus, to potentially turn into a pig instead of him and kind of act as protection. Death will be the best at this because Spider-Ham will always hit Death. Death is going to be very used to her pig form when Spider-Ham releases into Series 4. The other thing that you could do to kind of tech around this, I just showcased a game only a few days ago, or a video rather, a few days ago. The video had probably 5 or 6 games where I was playing a Destroyer-based Galactus list, which I really liked when Leech was big for a second. I was playing a deck with both Destroyer and a Tuma to just make the most out of opposing leeches. I could see potentially going back into that build of the deck. Shang-Chi is not really good. So basically, like when you play Destroyer versions of the deck, you want to play cards like Wolverine and Nimrod, and you don't want to have... You can't give your opponent priority, so Shang-Chi just isn't nearly as effective. But that could certainly be another build, another way that we take this deck in the future. I think that when Conquest Mode comes out, this will probably be the default strategy that I try, until, of course, they potentially nerf Galactus. There's a lot of people that really, really don't like playing against Galactus, and for that reason, I could definitely see some shakeups to just how the card works and just an overall kind of rework of the card. If that happens, well then none of these builds or ideas are going to work at all, and we'll go back to the drawing board and see what we can do. But for now, I think that this list is still a really good place to be, and yeah, I definitely recommend it. We saw a variety of different games today, some that went pretty well, some that went not so well. We saw like a lot of consistency, but also when the deck wasn't consistent, it was able to find other ways to grab victories. And Some of the losses were even just due to some of my own mistakes or just getting unlucky, and there's definitely some improvement that can be had there either way. But ultimately, I do think that this is a really good deck. I think it'll be fun for the Conquest mode if Galactus remains untouched, though. I do think that, yeah, looking at some potential destroyer lists could be good. Speaking of some other stuff coming up in the next season, a lot of movement. And movement decks are really, really good for Galactus lists, because your opponent, like by definition of their strategy, needs to make use of multiple locations, and Galactus just says, sorry, there's only one location, sorry friend, you can't move anywhere, and just makes all of those strategies really, really terrible. So I think that that's going to make Galactus even better, which is going to then make it even more important that Galactus does receive some sort of nerf. So I don't know how long you'll be able to play this deck for, but if you are able to try it out, I do think that it is really, really strong in its current form. For today, that's going to be it for me, though. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'm No Luck's Given. Peace.